Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 2, day 1 of Walk Two Moons. Let's get started. Today we're going to be reading chapters 9 and 10. Let's look at the vocabulary for today. Our first word is potential. Go ahead. Let's say it together. Potential. You'll notice there are 3 syllables in the word potential. Potential is an adjective that means possible. Phoebe and Sal keep calling the boy the potential lunatic. This means that they think he is possibly crazy. I can also say, tomorrow there is the potential for snow. You can add ly to potential to make the adverb potentially. Let's look at the breaks in the word potential. Think about where they would be. Let's check. I see an O, an E, an I, and an A in there in this word potential. You'll see my first break, which is an open syllable. My second break, which is a closed syllable. And my third syllable, which is a vowel team, IA. Let's take a look at our next word. The next word is sprawls. Sprawls is a verb that means to spread without restraint. Sal describes the city of Madison as a place that sprawls between 2 lakes. I might say my dog sprawls out on our bed, leaving me almost no room. You can add verb endings to sprawl to make the words sprawled and sprawling. Let's see the breaks in sprawls. Sprawls. Kind of sounds like it's just one syllable. I see an A. I don't see any other vowels. Let's see what kind of syllable this is. A vowel team. Let's get into our reading for today. Our first focus is, now we're going to see why the author chose the title for this book. Think about what it means to walk 2 moons in another person's shoes. Today we'll be reading chapters 9 and 10. Here we go. We're going to take a break also in chapter 10 to look at some figurative language. Chapter 9, The Message. On the way to Mary Lou's, Phoebe said, Mary Lou's family is not nearly as civilized as ours. In what way? I asked. Oh, you'll see, Phoebe said. Mary Lou Finney and Ben Finney were both in our class at school. At first I thought they were sister and brother, but Phoebe told me they were cousins, and that Ben was living with Mary Lou's family temporarily. Apparently, there was always at least one stray relative living at the Finneys temporarily. It was complete pandemonium at the Finneys. Mary Lou had an older sister and 3 brothers. In addition, there were her parents and Ben. There were footballs and basketballs lying all over the place, and boys sliding down the banister and leaping over the tables and talking with their mouths full, and interrupting everyone with endless questions. Phoebe took one look around and whispered to me, Mary Lou's parents do not seem to have much control over things. Phoebe could sound a bit prissy sometimes. Mr. Finney was lying in the bathtub with all his clothes on, reading a book. From Mary Lou's bedroom window, I saw Mrs. Finney laying on top of the garage with a pillow under her head. What's she doing? I asked. Mary Lou peered out the window. King of kings, she's taking a nap. When Mr. Finney got out of the bathtub, he went out in the backyard and tossed a football around with Dennis and Dougie, 2 of Mary Lou's brothers. Mr. Finney shouted, Over here! And that away! And way to go! The previous weekend, we had a school sports day. Parents were watching their children show off, and there were even some events for the parents too, such as the three-legged race and pass the grapefruit. My father could not come, but Mary Lou's parents were there and so were Phoebe's. Phoebe had said, "The games are a little childish sometimes, which is why my parents don't usually participate." Her parents stood on the sidelines, while Mr. and Mrs. Finney ran around shouting, "Over here!" and "Way to go!" in the three-legged race. The Finneys kept falling over. Phoebe said, "I wonder if Mary Lou is embarrassed because of the way her parents are acting." I didn't think it was embarrassing. I thought it was nice. But I didn't say so to Phoebe. I thought deep down Phoebe thought it was nice too, and she wished her own parents would act more like the Finneys. She couldn't admit this, though, and in a way I liked this about Phoebe, that she tried to defend her family. On the day that Phoebe and I met the potential lunatic, and then went over to Mary Lou's, a couple other peculiar things happened. We were sitting on the floor of Mary Lou's room, and Phoebe was telling Mary Lou about the mysterious potential lunatic. Mary Lou's brothers, Dennis, Doug, and Tommy, kept dashing in and out of the room, leaping on the bed, and squirting us with squirt guns. Mary Lou's cousin Ben was laying on her bed, staring at me with his black eyes. They looked like two sparkly black discs set into big round sockets. His dark eyelashes were long and feathery, casting shadows on his cheeks. "I like your hair," he said to me. "Can you sit on it?" "Yes, if I want." Ben picked up a piece of paper from Mary Lou's desk, lay back down on the bed, and drew a picture of a lizard-like creature with long black hair that, as it ran down the lizard's back and under its bottom, became a chair with legs. Underneath this, Ben had written, "Salamander sitting on her hair." "Very amusing," Phoebe said. She left the room, and Mary Lou followed her. I turned around to hand the drawing back to Ben, just as he leaned forward and mashed his lips into my collarbone. His lips rested there a moment. My nose was pressed into his hair, which smelled like grapefruit. Then he rolled off the bed, grabbed the drawing, and dashed out of the room. Did he actually kiss my collarbone? And if he did, why did he do that? Was that kiss supposed to land somewhere else? Like on my mouth, for example? That was a chilling thought. Had I imagined it? Maybe he merely brushed against me as he was rolling off the bed. On the way home from Mary Lou's that day, Phoebe said, "Wasn't it, loud there?" "I didn't mind," I said. I was thinking of something my father once said to my mother. "We'll fill the house up with children. We'll fill it right up to the brim." But they hadn't filled it up. It was just me and them. And then it was just me and my father. When we got back to Phoebe's house, her mother was lying on the couch, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Is something wrong?" Phoebe asked. "Oh, no," Mrs. Winterbottom said. "Nothing's wrong." Then Phoebe told her mother about the potential lunatic who had come to the house earlier. This news upset Mrs. Winterbottom. She wanted to know exactly what he had said, and what Phoebe said, and what he looked like, and how he acted, and how Phoebe acted, on and on. At last, Mrs. Winterbottom said, "I think we had better not mention this to your father." She reached forward, as if to hug Phoebe, but Phoebe pulled away. Later, Phoebe said, "That's odd. Usually my mother tells my father absolutely everything. Maybe she's just trying to save you from getting into trouble for talking with a stranger." "I still don't like keeping it secret from him," Phoebe said. We walked out onto her porch, and there, lying on the top step, was a white envelope. There was no name or anything on the outside. I thought it was one of those advertisements for painting your house or cleaning your carpets. Phoebe opened it. "Gosh," she said. Inside was a small piece of paper, and on it was printed this message: "Don't judge a man until you've walked 2 moons in his moccasins." "What an odd thing," Phoebe said. When Phoebe showed the message to her mother, Mrs. Winterbottom clutched at her collar. "Who could it be for?" Mrs. Winterbottom asked. Mr. Winterbottom came in the back door, carrying his golf clubs. Look, George, Mrs. Winterbottom said. Who could this be for? I couldn't say, really, Mr. Winterbottom said. But, George, why would someone send us that message? I couldn't say, Norma. Maybe it isn't for us. Not for us, Mrs. Winterbottom said. But it was on our steps. Really, Norma, it could be for anyone. Maybe it's for Prudence or Phoebe. Phoebe? Mrs. Winterbottom asked. Is it for you? For me? Phoebe said. I don't think so. Well, who is it for? Mrs. Winterbottom said. She was awfully worried. I believe she thought it came from the potential lunatic. Chapter 10. Huzzah, huzzah! I had just finished telling Gram and Gramps about the mysterious message when Gramps pulled off the freeway. He said he was tired of chewing up the road, and the white lines down the middle of the highway were starting to wiggle. As he drove into Madison, Wisconsin, Gramps said, I feel a little sorry for Mrs. Winterbottom. She doesn't sound very happy. They all sound screwy if you ask me, Gramps said. Being a mother is like trying to hold a wolf by the ears, Gramps said. If you have 3 or 4 or more chickabiddies, you're dancing on a hot griddle all the time. You don't have time to think about anything else. And if you've only got 1 or 2, it's almost harder. You have room left over. Empty spaces that you think you've got to fill up. Well, it sure ain't a cinch being a father either, Gramps said. Gramps touched his arm. Horse feathers, she said. Round and round we drove until Gramps saw a parking space. Another car saw it too, but Gramps was fast and pulled in, and when the man in the other car waved his fist, Gramps said, I'm a veteran. See this leg? Shrapnel. From German guns. I saved our country. We did not have the correct change for the parking meter, so Gramps wrote a long note about how he was a visitor from Bybanks, Kentucky, and he was a World War II veteran with German shrapnel in his leg, and he kindly appreciated the members of the fair city of Madison allowing him to park in this space, even though he did not have the correct change for the meter. He put this note on the dashboard. Do you really have German shrapnel in your leg? I asked. Gramps looked up at the sky. Mighty nice day, he said. The shrapnel was imaginary. Sometimes I am a little slow to figure these things out. My father once said I was as gullible as a fish. I thought he said edible. I thought he meant I was tasty. All right, I'm going to stop right there for a minute because let's talk about that word gullible and that phrase gullible as a fish for a moment. If I didn't know the meaning of the word gullible, I can make a pretty good inference here by putting clues together. I know that Gramps was lying about the shrapnel, which is metal, in his leg from the war, because he wanted to get that parking spot. But then Sal asked him, so she doesn't know that he's lying. Then she realizes that it's imaginary, because she doesn't want to say he is lying. And she says she is slow to figure things out. So, gullible as a fish must mean that she is easy to trick or fool. The city of Madison sprawls between 2 lakes, Lake Mendota and Lake Monona, and dribbling out of these are other piddly lakes. It seemed as if the whole city was on vacation, with people riding around on their bikes and walking along the lakes and feeding the ducks and eating and canoeing and windsurfing. I'd never seen anything like it. Gram kept saying, huzzah, huzzah. There is a part of the city where no cars can go, and thousands of people stroll around eating ice cream. We went to Ella's Kosher Deli, an ice cream parlor, and ate pastrami sandwiches and kosher dill pickles, followed by raspberry ice cream. After we walked around some more, we were hungry again, and so we had lemon tea and blueberry muffins at the Steep and Brew. All the while, I heard the whispers, "Rush, hurry, rush." Gram and Gramps moved too slowly. "Shouldn't we go now?" I kept asking. But Gram would say, "Huzzah, huzzah!" And Gramps would say, "We'll go soon, Chickabiddy, soon." "Don't you want to send any postcards?" Gram asked. "No, I do not." "Not even to your daddy?" No. There was a good reason for this. All along her trip, my mother had sent me postcards. She wrote, "Here I am in the Badlands, missing you terribly," and "This is Mount Rushmore, but I don't see any presidents' faces. I only see yours." The last postcard arrived 2 days after we found out she wasn't coming back. It was from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. On the front was a picture of a beautiful blue lake surrounded by tall evergreens. On the back she had written, "Tomorrow I'll be in Lewiston. I love you, my Salamanca tree." At last Gramps said, "I sure hate to get back on the road, but time's a-wastin'." Yes, I thought. Yes, yes, yes. Gram settled back for a nap, while I said a few thousand more prayers. The next thing I knew, Gramps was pulling off the road again. "Looky here," he said, "the Wisconsin Dells." He drove into a vast parking area and said, "Why don't you two go look around? I'm going to get a little shut-eye." Graham and I poked our noses into an old fort and then sat on the grass watching a group of Native Americans dance and beat drums. My mother had not liked the term Native Americans. She thought it sounded primitive and stiff. She said, "My great-grandmother was a Seneca Indian, and I'm proud of it." She wasn't a Seneca Native American. Indian sounds much more brave and elegant. In school, our teachers told us we had to say Native American, but I agree with my mother. Indian sounded much better. My mother and I liked this Indianness in our background. She said it made us appreciate the gifts of nature. It made us closer to the land. I lay back and closed my eyes, listening to the drums beat rush, 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 and the dancers chant, "Hurry, hurry, hurry." Someone was jingling bells, too, and for a moment I thought of Christmas and sleigh bells. When I opened my eyes again, Gram was gone. I glanced around, trying to remember where we had parked the car. I looked around the crowd, back at the trees, over the concession stand. They've gone, I thought. They've left me. I pushed through the people. The crowd was clapping. The drums were beating. I was all turned around and could not remember which way we had come. There were 3 signs indicating different parking areas. The drums thundered. I pushed further into the crowd of people who were now clapping louder, in time with the drums. The Indians had formed 2 circles, one inside the other, and were hopping up and down. The men danced in the outer circle and wore feather headdresses and short leather aprons. On their feet were moccasins, and I thought again about Phoebe's message. Don't judge a man until you've walked 2 moons in his moccasins. Inside the circle of men, the women in long dresses and ropes of beads had joined arms and were dancing around one older woman who was wearing a regular cotton dress. On her head was an enormous headdress, which had slipped down over her forehead. I looked closer. The woman in the center was hopping up and down. On her feet were flat white shoes. In the space between 2 drum beats, I heard her say, "Huzzah, huzzah." Oh, Gram. And that's all we have for today. I'll see you soon.